Welcome to a Healthy Mind segment. This one's on suicide. My name is Juan Strickland. I'm a certified teacher of NAMI's Family to Family class, and NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
And my name is LaShawn McCautry, and I am a social worker.
So we're here today to talk about suicide, the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the thing that no one wants to really talk about, okay? It's an obvious truth or fact, especially one regarded as embarrassing or undesirable, that is being intentionally ignored or left unaddressed. And let me tell you this, you never want to ignore the whole notion of suicide or a loved one maybe thinking about suicide, not something to ignore.
No, very serious topic, and I think I'm happy for the opportunity to address it because I think, you never know who you can reach and who needs to hear some information about this.
That's right. And people, rightly so, often feel very uncomfortable talking about suicide. It says here that suicide crosses all ages, all ethnic groups, all socioeconomic groups in the US and around the world. We also see here that research shows that approximately 90% of people who have died by suicide, 90% were suffering from some type of mental illness.
Yeah.
That's very powerful, very telling statistic.
That's pretty high, yes.
If you think about some of the famous people in the world, recently Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Robin Williams, the comedian, Junior Seau, the famous San Diego Charger, all of these individuals committed suicide. They had all the access to care, they had all the money in the world, all the wealth, and they still were in such a dark place that they took their lives.
And it should be noted, these are just the ones that you hear about.
That's right.
Because they're celebrities. Think about others who you don't know that, have suffered from this, from suicide.
That's right. And let's talk about gender differences. It says here that the suicide rate is approximately 4 times higher among males than among females. While females have more suicide thoughts than men die from suicide more often. And people say, well, why is that?
Right.
Men tend to go to the extreme of taking a gun.
Right.
Women may take a pill.
Right.
Men may jump off of a cliff. Again, a woman may, just overdose on a medication, that type of thing.
Or slit their wrist or attempt to slit their wrist.
Exactly. So that's pretty powerful.
It is.
Also, we know that suicide is the second leading cause of death among 15 to 24-year-olds.
And that's pretty sad.
It's very sad.
That's our young people.
People almost in the prime of their life,
That's right.
taking their lives.
That's right.
And on average, this is very telling, 122 Americans die each day by suicide. 122
It's way
people
too
take
many.
their lives, way too many, absolutely. So suicide is the act of intentionally causing one's own death, okay? Now there are warning signs. I know in Claremont, the city of Claremont, there are signs up that say, if you see something, say something.
Right.
And the same thing with suicide. If you see something, if you sense something, say something. There are warning signs.
Right. I was just going to say, what should people look out for? Because, I could be sitting next to a coworker.
Right.
And they may have some signs, but if I don't know what to look out for, then,
Excellent question. Excellent question. Some signs are preoccupation with death and dying.
Is that just kind of always talking about it?
Always talking about it.
Oh, I wish I wasn't here.
Reading about it, maybe researching it, right? Internet searches, talking about feeling hopeless. So feelings of hopelessness is another sign. People talking about having no reason to live. People talking about being a burden to others. That could be a sign.
Wow.
Others feel trapped with unbearable pain. If you see a loved one isolating all of a sudden, those could be very telltale signs of suicidal thoughts and ideations.
Yes.
What about younger children? What do we see here?
So Suicide attempts in younger children are often impulsive, and it's usually associated with feelings of sadness, confusion, or anger. So in a younger child, it's more about their impulsivity.
Impulsivity.
Yes,
right.
when they're upset or something like that. I actually know of someone who, and it's really sad, you know, if you hear of an 8 or 9-year-old trying to do something to kill themselves.
Right.
And it could be because of, you know, their friend didn't talk to them.
Right.
But the only way they are thinking of things getting better is by not being around. That's pretty sad for a young child.
And what's scary is that young children lack judgment. And
Right.
when you have the impulsivity kicking in, it's very hurtful because, you know, the child really didn't want to take their life.
Right.
They did it by impulse.
Right.
Then we have the teenager segment. Teenager suicide attempts are often associated with feelings of stress, self-doubt, pressure to succeed, or to be a part of something
That's
or
right.
some group of people, whatever. Even a function of financial uncertainty and disappointment and loss. That's what happens with teenagers.
Absolutely.
We have here the thoughts about suicide and suicide attempts are often associated with depression. So we just finished talking about depression in
Right.
the last segment. There is a very strong correlation between depression and suicide because that fog that we talked about before kicks in. Impulsivity, substance abuse, drug use, self-medicating elevate suicide risk as well. Now, there is a way to prevent suicide. And we want to talk about that. And this is going to feel counterintuitive. But it says here that you can prevent suicide by asking about it. Your direct, non-judgmental questions can encourage them to share their thoughts and feelings with you. You know, we talked about the elephant in the room and people
Right.
ignoring the signs.
That's right.
No, you want to talk about it. You want to approach your loved one in a non-judgmental way because studies show that talking about it actually helps to diminish the chances of suicide.
I see it as reaching out.
Reaching out.
Reaching out to
Right.
someone. And if you have, even if it may not be the case, if you have this, like a red flag goes up, reach out
Right.
to someone.
But people think if you talk about it, if you ask your loved one about, are you thinking about taking your life, that's going to trigger them to do it.
Yes.
And that is not the case. The research does not show that.
Right.
Talking openly about suicidal thoughts and feelings can save a life.
Save a life, and that's important.
So let's say that you have a friend, a family member, and you're feeling like they're having suicidal ideations. You've noticed their behavior. Then here are some of the questions you can ask them. How about you take the first two questions?
Okay, so one of the questions you can definitely ask is, do you have a suicide plan?
That's pretty direct.
It is.
Wow.
Do you have a suicide plan? Then you can also ask, do you have what you need to carry out a plan? Do you have access to a gun? Do you have access to, you know, pills in the medicine cabinet?
Wow, those are some pretty penetrating questions.
They're direct.
Very direct. I wouldn't have thought that. Here are two other questions. Do you know when you would do it? Do you know when you would take your life? How about this question? Do you intend to take your own life? You can't get any more direct than that.
They're very direct.
Yeah, and that certainly is not ignoring the elephant in the room.
Right.
If you suspect that a person may be suicidal, get them help immediately. And what are some of the ways we can get them help?
So definitely calling 911. That's, you know, it's an emergency. We wouldn't want anybody to carry through or follow through with that. So definitely calling 911 to get an emergency response.
Right. But people often think, oh man, I can't affect their life that way. Well, it's like them losing their life totally, or it's saving their life.
Intervening, yes.
Intervening.
Absolutely doing something to intervene.
There's the 800 number for the suicide hotline, which is 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255. When a suicide occurs, remember this, when a suicide occurs, everyone is affected. including the people who are left behind.
Absolutely. And some of those resources, like you mentioned, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline,
Right.
Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide, the National Institute of Mental Health, and of course, one that you're pretty familiar with, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI.
Exactly. And so thank you for that. And just quickly to summarize, don't ignore the elephant in the room.
That's right.
Okay? Confront it. If you see something, say something. Be proactive, not reactive, and ask for help. Thank you very much.
Thank you.